Hello and welcome to Indie Book Magic, a podcast that connects geek readers and writers in an open, lighthearted, and occasionally random environment. We're your friendly hosts, Janeen Ippolito and
H.L. Burke.
And today we have an interview episode for you. We have a special guest, Kyle Robert Shultz, who came across our way 6 months to a year ago-ishness. He's really awesome. He is an author of a really great series of fairy tale retellings, and I'm sure he has many other things in the works. He also does a podcast for authors as well, and he is a book blogger. So he is involved in all kinds of things online and probably has about as little free time as we do. So Kyle, it's great to have you on the show today.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, should we jump right in then?
Let's go right into it, yeah.
Okay, now this is a question for Kyle. Describe yourself and or your writing in 3 adjectives. And so this isn't the world's shortest answer. Explain why.
Well, I think the 3 I would pick are snarky, adventurous, and fun. Snarky because the snark is very strong with my writing, especially my dialogue. Adventurous because I try to keep a strong atmosphere of adventure, and also because writing each one of my stories is kind of an adventure for me. I try to come up with exciting new twists on old stories and even on the established formula of stories I've already written. So I kind of mix things up with every new book. And fun, my main goal is for my stories to be entertaining above all else, and just for people to have a good time reading them. So those 3 would definitely be my pick.
That is awesome. Yeah. We definitely are the fans of the snark here.
Yeah, I was going to say, your 3 adjectives totally explain how we're just both eating up your books right now, because the snark is powerful on this show. And of course, the idea of fresh twists and entertainment as well are really awesome things to focus on. Now, going into one of the meatier questions, because this is February, so it's our month of love. And Kyle, yes, you actually do have some romantic threads in your stories, which is not something people often think about for male writers. Now, do you think there is a bias, stated or otherwise, against men writing romance or romantic themes? So yeah, go ahead and make statements for your entire gender. Just do it.
Well, contrary to popular belief, we don't all have to have an explosion on every page in order to write a story. I do think that it's even though it's usually unstated, I think there is kind of a bias against men writing romance, and I have to admit it's not something that I have a lot of experience in, but I think that women who form the majority of authors and readers tend to assume that men can't or won't get romance right, because we are known for being kind of insensitive to emotional cues and psychological nuances. But I think that's a stereotype. It may be a common male tendency, but I think a guy can overcome it through practice and actively working on his relationship skills, which helps improve the male writer's ability to tackle the romantic angle of a story. And I think of it just in terms of, I try to make it seem as natural as possible and let it develop as naturally as possible. So yeah, I do think there's kind of a bias. I think a lot of people seem surprised that I write in this genre of fantasy at all, and that I'm not writing sci-fi on a spaceship or something, which I've tried that, but I've never really been very good at it. So this appealed to me more for some reason. So yeah.
You should probably do a version of one of your stories should be on a spaceship, just for the heck of it, if you can fit that in.
Yeah, there's kind of a multiverse element going on, so I guess there could be some alternate reality where it all happens on a spaceship. That could work. That could definitely work.
Maybe a Flash Gordon style thing.
Oh yeah. Sky's the limit. Yeah. And I find that with your books, Kyle, they are very character-driven, and I think books that are very character-driven, not that books shouldn't have good characters anyway, but ones that really focus on those winning interactions and that dialogue, sometimes they can lend themselves to having more subplots that go more romantic or even just more feels, just because you have people interacting, and it isn't always explosions. It's dialogue, it's relationships, it's connecting to each other.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, I feel that a good romance should begin with friendship, certainly. So that's kind of what I tried to develop with my characters at first and just let it go from there. And that I think helped for it to feel more natural. And I strongly feel that that's important. I try not to do too much insta love, although I did do it in one book, but there was a reason for it. And I kind of subverted it. So,
all right, Heidi, you want to tackle our next question, Heidi?
Definitely. Now, I don't know about Janeen, but I personally have a problem with this one. I like to joke that if my characters aren't married by the halfway point, I start to get anxious.
That's kind of true.
But if you're trying to write a long game romance, what is the best traits that make that work out without like frustrating your readers? And as a follow-up, what do you think makes a couple truly shippable, and having readers want to put them together?
Well, I think the best traits for a long-term romance are always keeping in mind, like you said, not causing the reader to get sick of it, is first of all chemistry. The characters need to fit together in order for the romance to work in terms of their personalities. That doesn't mean they need to be similar necessarily, but the reader needs to be able to buy them as a couple and needs to want them to be together. That helps to keep readers invested. If it's just two people that you're like, I don't buy these people being together, it doesn't work at all. And that's important for keeping them engaged. I also think that humor is really important, actually, because from what not just from my own tastes, but from what I've seen in terms of what people seem to like with books, people always seem to prefer the romance where there's some humor and there's some banter going on. So I think that's essential. I think you have to have some element of that. I mean, there's always some drama to romance, I think, but if you let that squelch all the banter and the fun in a fictional romance, people get tired of it really quick if it's just constant angst. So the characters need to be able to laugh at themselves and at each other, and that's one way to give a romance longevity. And also uncertainty. It's a cliche, but I think that the will they, won't they element is kind of useful for a long-term romance. I don't think that means that you should keep bringing the characters together and then ripping them apart over and over again. That's done on TV shows all the time, and usually people get sick of it. I mean, I think Castle is probably one of the best examples.
Gosh,
Oh my gosh.
that's terrible. Oh my, I want to strangle those writers.
Just end the show already. But yeah, and I've seen it happen in books too, where it's like, okay, we're finally in love. Oh wait, no, there's this horrible dark secret from years and years ago where I killed your grandfather, and actually now you hate me.
It's better than my memories that you actually are their grandfather.
That would be a lot worse. Yeah. So I don't think that bringing them together and pulling them apart over and over again is a good idea. But what I prefer to do is start out with some major obstacle that seems to prevent the characters from even having a romance in the first place. So like you can see them being a couple, but there's this huge gap between them and they need to start all the way back at square one and work their way towards having a romance. And then that makes it last a little bit longer. It does three things that really. It makes it last longer. It increases reader interest because they're wondering how this is going to work. And when the characters finally do fall in love with each other, then that moment feels more earned. So I think that's really important, because if you just push people together too fast, sometimes it feels like, okay, they didn't really earn that and they don't really know each other well enough yet. And for a couple to be shippable, one of the main things about that is I think they need to be an interesting combination. Just two characters that you think, this is an interesting two kind of people to bring together from two different worlds, either literally or figuratively. I think that's a good thing. I think snarky banter, once again, that's a good thing to have for a shippable couple. And one of the major things for me is I don't think that they should turn into lovesick puppies or inconsiderate jerks because of their relationship. Once they start treating the other characters like dirt or making really dumb decisions for the sake of their relationship, then you have a problem, in my opinion. Then it gets.
Oh yeah.
I think we've all had that frustrating moment with a couple on either a TV show or a book series. Just like, it's time to kick them out the window.
Oh yeah, to get that feeling like, okay, I wish you guys had never gotten together. I'm like, no, that's that's like
ruined it.
Yeah, I liked it so much better before. It was like, banter. I think that's something else. You can have a couple that like work great as bantering without them having to end up together.
Mhm.
And if the romance, the ones that really work as a shippable couple are the ones that they can get together and not lose that. You know, if they're going to
Mhm.
lose that, then they may not be your shippable couple.
Yeah,
Okay.
I definitely agree with that. Yeah.
All right, Kyle. Now, going off the romance thing for a bit, your stories often involve cracking open pre existing tales, often fairy tales, and making readers see them in a different light. Do you have a specific goal or master plan in this approach?
Yeah, I'd say that my goal in that is related to my faith, actually. I am trained in Christian apologetics in the defense of Christianity. I have a degree in religious studies, and a lot of my education revolved around getting people to see the Bible and the principles of Christianity in a new light. So that doesn't translate into me having overt Christian themes in my stories. They're really very subtle. But I think that shining a new light on fairy tales and other old stories, it primes people to take a second look at other things they might take for granted, like the Bible. So even though there are almost never direct references to Christianity in my stories, the underlying purpose of what I do is actually very faith-based. It's just kept subtle, and it's more about the general principle than actually incorporating biblical themes.
Nice. Would you say that's what draws you to fairy tales, or is there something else that makes you go for that particular, like, as opposed to mythology or literally retelling Bible stories?
No, actually, what draws me to fairy tales is pretty mercenary. Actually, I have always envied the people who get to reinterpret the old classics, the people who get to be the new showrunners on Doctor Who or the producers of comic book movies. They all have these awesome toys to play with, these characters that are really familiar to people that they get to do their own take on. They can take things familiar and rethink them in amazing new ways and get longtime fans really excited about them. And I could never really get into writing fan fiction because I knew the stuff I was writing wasn't mine. It bugs me to
Yeah.
write something that I know I don't have a legal right to, so I could never even really do that. So I turned to things that I could make money from without getting into trouble, which is fairy tales and other public domain stuff. And there's a ton of great public domain stuff out there. I mean, you can do Sherlock Holmes, you can do Alice in Wonderland, whatever. And I found that to be really enjoyable. Of course, while I've been doing this, there has existed the TV show Once Upon a Time, which is now gone, uh, or almost gone. I actually came up with the rough idea for the fairy tale universe where my stories are set before the TV show premiered, but I have been influenced somewhat by both its successes and its failures in adapting fairy tales over the years. So, and now it's been canceled. So now the genre of parallel universe fairy tale retellings is all mine. So
You have one.
Evil one.
You have
Yeah,
one.
and the thing is, what you do is with taking it kind of more of a 1920s context, that's really very fresh. And
Thanks.
it's actually,
Yeah, I love that. I love doing that.
and it's fascinating because it's actually very sort of trendy now, but it wasn't like trendy years ago. So like you're like, oh wow, I was ahead of my time. Okay.
Yeah, well, I always loved the 1920s because I've always loved like P.G. Wodehouse. That was really the main reason why I picked that. And I tried setting it in a different era. Like, well, maybe if I make it more like classic 1800s steampunk, it'll sell better. But I couldn't do that. So I kept going back to the 1920s. So I gave up. And it worked. So
As a PG Woodhouse fan, I have to say it does work well, especially because Woodhouse himself, when he was doing things, was doing his own riffs off of tropes and ideas for his own kind of brand of humor. So that voice really lends well to what you're doing. Now, do you have fairy tales that you can't wait to take on?
I am very excited about doing several of them. One of them is Peter Pan. That's coming up in book 6, which is going to be called The Wreck of the Jolly Roger. I know a lot of people have really been pressuring me to get that one written because they're really excited about seeing where that goes. And I'm excited about diving in with that. I have some fun ideas for how that's going to work. It's going to involve exploring part of my world that I really haven't gone into at all yet. Also looking forward to Aladdin in book 7. That'll be the 39 Thieves. And because the fun thing about stories with genies and wishes is that you get to do alternate reality stuff. And I have an interesting twist in mind for that. It's not going to be your standard character makes a wish, the world goes crazy, and then they have to put it back. There's going to be an added dimension to that. And I've explored some alternate reality stuff before in one short story, but I want to dive deeper with that element in that book. But what I'm most excited about right now is something that's coming in the very near future. I'm going to introduce Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde into my universe in a really big way very soon. It's going to stretch across 2 different stories in an interesting way. There's going to be a Blackfire story with my fan favorite dragon character, Malcolm Blackfire, that involves Jekyll and Hyde. And that version of the character will also show up in Beaumont and Beasley Book 4. So I am working on that right now, and I'm really looking forward to releasing that.
Well, you know me, I will never argue against more dragons in fiction.
Yeah, I love how you're building this whole massive universe. It's like, and they're all interacting, crossovers and everything, and just, makes readers want to just read everything you write, which is, definitely not a bad thing.
That's my strategy, and that's all deliberate.
You'll all be trapped in this awesome
lots of
world.
fun. I love doing it.
All right, now it is time for the random question, and I see it's actually up on your question docket there, Heidi. So,
yes, Janeen. And this one will, I think, Kyle, this kind of flows naturally from what we were just talking about, because you need a plan for this.
Yes.
Okay, listen carefully. When cat dragons take over the world, how do you plan to win their good graces? And remember, these are not just regular dragons. These are cat dragons.
Okay. Oh, boy. Well, I think I would pretend to go along with them while building my own army of something else to usurp them. I would get into all kinds of political intrigue and pretend to go along with their plan, but while plotting my own takeover at some other point. I'm very patient. I'd find some other species. I don't know. What would it be? What's the opposite of cat dragons?
Something with dogs, maybe?
Dog sea monsters. Well,
that's great because cats don't like water, so there you go.
Yeah. This will be brilliant. This could be an entire series.
Nature's natural enemies. Oh my. Oh, that sounds fantastic. Well, it's been great having you on the show with us today, Kyle. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed doing this. I've really been enjoying the previous episodes of the podcast, and I love it. It's my favorite podcast right now, so I really admire what you're doing.
And you know what? Go ahead and tell us, what's your podcast that you're putting out there for writers? Because I think you have a different angle.
Yeah, my podcast is called Fearless Fiction, and because I listen to a ton of author podcasts, and mine specifically goes after the people whom I've met many of who they want to be writers, they want to publish their stories, but they're just afraid to take that final step and get their story out there and get it published. I am trying to reach those people and just find different ways of breaking down the barriers between them and getting published. So it's all about overcoming creative anxiety, because I think that's really common, and it's keeping a lot of great stories from being published.
Awesome. That is fantastic. Very excited that we have a podcast out that's going for that angle, because that is a very real thing that a lot of writers face. All right, Heidi. So what are we talking about next month?
Next month, we're kicking off our March Fate and Luck month. And this is kind of commemorating St. Patrick's Day and the luck of the Irish. We will be taking on destiny, coincidence, and general uses of luck and fortune in fiction.
Mm-hmm. Including that wonderful thing. Okay, I got this. I looked it up online. Deus ex machina.
See, I would totally have just pronounced it wrong and waited for the wonderful comments.
Yeah, I know. I'll probably still get someone who's like, no, you didn't quite say it the right way, because I have a small following of linguists who kind of pick at my pronunciation. Exactly. But that wonderful thing, the hand of, the machine of God and the machine coming out and swooping things out in your stories. So it's going to be a fun month of destiny and serendipity and coincidences. And thank you for tuning into Indie Book Magic today, awesome listeners out there. If you're interested in following us, we have a Facebook page. We are on Twitter. You can give us reviews on iTunes. And also check out Kyle on, where are you on social media, Kyle?
Well, basically, I always tell people if you plug Kyle Robert Shultz with no C into anything, including airport terminal kiosks, my webpage will probably come up. So, so yeah, it's like facebook.com/Kyle Robert Shultz. That's where my Facebook page is. You can find me on Twitter, Kyle RBRT Schultz, and main place to find out about me and my work is my website, which is www.kylerobertschultz with no C.com.
Awesome. So go ahead and check out Kyle, check out his books, and go ahead and get addicted to his awesome multiverse. And thank you so much for tuning into Indie Book Magic. I'm Janeen Ippolito with
H.L. Burke, and thank you also, Kyle Robert Schultz, today.
Thank you. Great time.
Have a great day.